Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is campaigning in Iowa today, and he spoke to voters as part of a bus tour that was set up by a super PAC supporting him. He also spoke with CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, and Ed began by asking him if this campaign shakeup we've been reporting on this week is over or whether there are still changes to come.
As a commander, you put out intent about what you want to see. If that intent is not followed, you ensure it's going to be followed. I think that we're in good shape. I think this has been a great area for us. We're going to continue going out and meeting with individual voters in all these early states, and that's going to be the focus, and that's really been the focus all along.
Across other parts of the country today, there's a lot of waiting and seeing about the former president and the potential legal issues he may yet face. If you're talking to Republican primary voters in this state and across the country, how should they be thinking about him, and how should they be factoring in the legal challenges that he's facing? Is that something that disqualifies him? Is it something that should make them look at someone like you instead?
Well, I think voters have to make those decisions on that. I think what I can say is, what we need to make the election about is a referendum on Biden's failed policies and our positive vision to get America on the right track, and then who can win, and then who can actually deliver on these things. So, for example, I'm very frustrated with the FBI and the Department of Justice. A lot of our voters have seen a two-tiered standard justice weaponization. So, okay, what are we going to do about it? I'll go in and end the weaponization. We will have a new FBI director. We will clean house. We will ensure that we're involved in making sure that they're staying within the lines. And you're going to see big changes. I will get that done. So I would just tell voters, think about, okay, what does the country need going forward, and who's most likely to bring those policies about? And I think my record in Florida shows when I say I'm going to do something, I deliver on it, and I'll do the same thing as president.
Does all of this legal stuff he's facing disqualify him, though, in your view?
At the end of the day, voters make that decision. Some people ask me, like, well, if somebody's indicted, should they be able to run? The problem is we've seen political indictments. I mean, I think Bragg was political. You have these people. So that would just give any prosecutor the ability to render someone ineligible. So I've not said that. But I also think just at the end of the day, the election's got to be about the future. It's got to be about what people are concerned about. And the more it's about other things, the more Biden's able to hang out in the basement again and end up cruising to a victory. And I know Republicans don't want that to happen.
You're getting ready to give a big economic speech on Monday in New Hampshire.
Are you going to be there?
We'll see. Okay. We're checking the flights. But about reviving the American dream and your thoughts on economic growth, 2.4% quarterly growth, though, in the last quarter.
Yeah, but that's
not good.
But that's not been. If you look at the last decade or so, our growth has been in the 1% on average. We've not been able to grow like we need to. So that's going to be a part of it. We need to get to 3% growth. Not only is that more opportunity for people, all these budget issues are so much easier to solve if you have that. So that's going to be one component of it. The other component, and there's going to be many, but it's at the end of the day, we talk about economy. What does that even mean? It means what kind of society do we want? And I want, if you work hard, you work to get the most of your God-given ability, you ought to be able to afford a house and a car and do all those things. And that's not been what we've seen over these last few years. I think government policy is a big reason why prices have gone up and people have lacked opportunity. So we're going to correct a lot of that, but always focus on, we're a country with an economy, not the other way around. I want to make sure American citizens are put first and foremost. We've got to reevaluate this relationship with the Communist Party of China. That has not been good for us. China has gotten much more powerful. They've taken all this industry. It's hollowed out parts of our country. And now we have almost a peer competitor militarily. So we need to do more of that here in the United States.
So if there's a DeSantis administration, how quickly does the United States get to 3% growth?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of different factors. I think we will put policies in place that are going to pave the way. I mean, for example, we're going to do energy independence. We're going to use more of our domestic energy, open that up. I think it's good for our industrial base. I think it's good for jobs. And I think it's ultimately very good for prices for individuals to be able to afford. That's going to make a difference. We're going to be getting rid of a lot of the bureaucracy that the Biden administration's imposed on the economy. That's going to help small businesses. And at the end of the day, we need healthy small business. We need them to grow. In Florida, we lead the nation in new business formation. Our growth rate's been much more than 2% since I've been governor, and we basically have functionally zero unemployment. Anyone that wants a job can get a job. And oh, by the way, we've reduced our state's debt by almost 25% since I've been governor. Imagine if we actually reduced debt federally.
I want to ask you one other on the weather. It's been extremely hot across the entire country. They say now July may be the hottest month ever around the world. You saw triple-digit water temperatures in Florida this past week. Is there something the federal government should be doing, can do, or maybe should not do to fight extreme weather as it changes around the world?
Well, look, what I would say, Florida, first of all, we live with this. We're prepared. Of course, this is hurricane season, so when you have warmer temperatures, that can whip up more storms. And so that's just something we're locked and loaded for. It's something we look at very, very seriously, and we've had to contend with that over the years. Here's the problem, I think, with what Biden's doing with the Green New Deal and those types of policies. China's adding a new coal plant, like what, every week, every 2 weeks? They are not going to change any of their behavior. Meanwhile, we're kneecapping some of our industries. In Florida, we've had a huge reduction in emissions without having any of those mandates. Why? Because innovation has taken hold. You've gone to cleaner fossil fuels, and solar is actually economic, not because of subsidies, not because we're forcing it, but because that's how the markets develop. So we need to have innovation, and we need to have people be able to make decisions. Don't try to force this. Don't force people into electric vehicles if that's something they can't afford or don't want. That just makes us more dependent on China.
Vice President Harris is coming to Iowa tomorrow to, in essence, troll you guys who are all gathering tomorrow night in Des Moines, or at least call out Republican policies as she sees them. What do you make of her decision to come here?
I thank her. I mean, the more that it's me versus Harris, because ultimately, if you look at the next election, she's going to be the VP. It's possible she could end up being president of the United States. And I think voters need to take a hard look at that and see if that's something that they would want. I can tell you, I think the more they see, the more they would not want. And she was demagoguing Florida's curriculum with African American history. Most states don't even have African American history standards. I think it's like 13 or 14 states. We're one of them that do. We had really serious scholars, African American, many of them, put out a huge compendium about all these things that many other states are not requiring. And she tried to demagogue it, saying somehow that was like justifying slavery, which was totally the opposite. I mean, they were very clear about the injustices. She's now been called on that because she supported an AP African American history course that had the same thing in it, didn't make a peep at that time. So when people see that, they're like, look, we've got serious issues here in this country. Don't try to demagogue something. And I get like some people in the press will amplify, but ultimately people want the truth.
But was picking a fight with Congressman Donalds on this?
It's not picking a fight. It's, look, at the end of the day, Floridians should stand up for Florida. Don't side with Kamala Harris and liberals who are demagoguing this. These are people that worked really hard on this. Our State Board of Education approved it. You had nobody raising a ruckus about this until it became convenient to try to do it. So I would just say, I'd ask all my colleagues in Florida, stand up for your state. Don't side with Kamala Harris.
All right. Governor, thank you for taking a few minutes.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
And Ed O'Keefe joins us now from Indianola, Iowa. Ed, good to see you. Great get there with the governor. You asked him about his campaign reset. I also thought it was fascinating to hear that he said that voters should decide what to make of the indictments on Trump. What do you make of his responses there, and anything that you've seen notable from how he's been interacting on the trail today?
Caitlin, there are those Republican candidates who say that the legal issues facing the former president are disqualifying and he should no longer be in the race, and there are those that don't. And he's clearly still in that camp of people who say, let the voters sort that out. But, and then makes the argument that the Justice Department, the FBI have to be revamped, and that's something we're hearing from several other contenders as well. The point, though, that he continues to make, even if he doesn't make it first, is the more attention that's focused on the former president's legal issues, the more the Republican Party is not focused on defeating President Biden. That is a compelling point that I believe he and his team suspect is going to continue to catch on with GOP voters as the primaries and the caucuses near. And it's the one he's sticking to for now. But he is certainly not in that Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson, to some extent Will Hurd camp, which frankly isn't doing as well anyway. He's more still in that let the voters decide for themselves.
Yeah, Ned, it seems like a way to kind of thread the needle with the Trump base, not alienate them, but also making a pitch for a different turning of the page, perhaps. Well, Ed O'Keefe, great interview as always, and we'll follow your reporting there in Iowa. Thank you so much.